Chapter 1. The Graveyard Shift. The blender came back at 3 in the morning, which was, by then, the only time Mira expected anything. She knew it was him before she looked up because of the doors. The big automatic glass panels at the front of HomePro warehouse slid open for everyone. For the night shift forklift guys, for the insomniac couple who came in weekly to argue about paint, for a moth once. They did not slide open for him. He waited for someone else to trip the sensor and walked in behind them, like a man slipping through a held elevator. She'd noticed it the third night and decided not to think about it. "I would like to return this," he said, and set the box on the counter with the care of a man diffusing it. "It's 3 a.m. You are open at 3 a.m. That's a threat we make. We don't expect people to take us up on it." She pulled the box toward her. Top-of-the-line blender, sealed, not a fingerprint on it. "What's wrong with it?" He considered the question like it had been asked by a tribunal. "It is loud." "It's a blender." "It is catastrophically loud. It does not make a sound. It commits one. I put a single banana into it and it screamed at me as though I had wronged it personally." A pause. "I found I could not be in the room." "Here we go," said the part of Mira's brain that had kept her sane through 4 years of this job. 3 in the morning and we've got a poet. Smile, process, do not engage, do not, "Oh, we're going to engage, aren't we?" We always engage. "You bought a high-performance blender," she said, "and you're returning it because it's good at blending." "I am returning it because it is hostile." "It's not hostile, it's a kitchen appliance, it doesn't have intent." "Everything has intent if it's loud enough." He said this with the calm of a man stating a property of water. "By that logic, you should be returning the whole store. We sell loud things. Loud is the business." "I am aware. I have surveyed it. The leaf blowers alone are a moral emergency." He glanced toward the seasonal aisle as though it had personally wronged him. "But I did not bring a leaf blower into my home and invite it to scream at my fruit. I brought this. And so this is the one I am returning." "You invited it, the blender, into your home." "I purchased it." The verbs are different and I no longer trust either of them. He set both hands at the edge of the counter, perfectly still. "I would like the refund processed before it begins again. It is in the box. It is not making the sound, but I can feel it deciding to." "It's a sealed box. It is not deciding anything." "You have clearly never owned this blender." She looked at him properly, which was a mistake she kept making. He was tall in a way that organized the room around him, dark-haired, dressed like he'd wandered out of a far more expensive store than this one. He didn't fidget. He didn't shift his weight. He stood like furniture that had decided to attend. "Name," she said. "You have it, from the others." "I have to ask anyway. Returns policy." She didn't have to ask. She wanted to hear him say it again. "Casimir." "Last name." "Beaumont." He paused, and something almost happened at the corner of his mouth. The ghost of a thing that didn't make it. "You may also have Beaumont, no further questions, if your system requires a second field." It accepted it last time. It did. She typed it in. The system, which had spent 4 years asking her for information no one ever had, accepted Casimir Beaumont, no further questions, with the placid acceptance of a machine that had given up on dignity long before she had. "This is your, let me see, 14th return in 3 weeks. That seems high." "It's extremely high. It's the kind of high that has a manager." She scanned the barcode. "It's the kind of high where the manager makes a face and says the word corporate like it's going to bite him." "Your manager is afraid of corporate." "My manager is afraid of weather. Corporate is aspirational." She hit the return. The refund went to a card that was matte black and had no numbers on it at all, which she had also decided not to think about. 3 to 5 business days, Mr. Beaumont, no further questions." "Thank you." He inclined his head. Not a nod, an inclination, with weight in it. the gesture of a man who had once received the surrender of something larger than a refund. You are very good at this. At returns. At all of it. He gathered nothing because he was leaving empty-handed, as he always did. You are the only person who argues with me. It is novel. And then he was gone, and the doors, which had opened to let a delivery driver out, closed behind a space where he was no longer standing. Mira leaned on the counter and stared at the blender he'd left her. Okay, said her brain. Let's review the file. 14 returns, always at 3 a.m., always sealed, always perfect, always loud or bright or wrong in a way that isn't real. A black card with no numbers. The doors don't open for him. She did not finish the thought. She was good at not finishing thoughts. It was, in its way, the central skill of the job. Dev found the file the next afternoon, which Mira knew because he called her in 2 hours before her shift even started, his tie already loosened to the panic setting. Mira, we need to talk about Mr. He looked at the printout like it owed him money. Beaumont, comma, no further questions. That's a system thing. He's just Beaumont. 14 returns, Mira. 14. In 3 weeks. That's... He did the math, visibly, with his whole face. That's almost $6,000 cycling in and out of my store, and every single item comes back perfect. And corporates flagged it as possible fraud, and I have to write something in the box that says why, and I cannot write, the toaster was gleefully malicious, Mira. I cannot put that in the box. Did he say that about the toaster? He said it had a smugness in its heat. I have it here. I wrote it down because I didn't believe it. Dev pressed his fingers to the bridge of his nose. Is it fraud? Is he washing money? Is this a money thing? I don't think it's a money thing, Mira thought about the doors. I think he genuinely can't use any of it. Then why does he keep buying it? And there it was, the actual question, the one she'd been not finishing for 3 weeks. Why does a man buy a complete human household, one appliance at a time, fail at every single one, and bring each of them back to the one cashier who tells him no? I don't know, she said, but I'll find out. She heard the words coming and let them. I'll do an in-store consultation. Customer success. We do those. We don't do those. We do now. I'll find out what he actually needs, get him into one product he'll keep, and your return numbers go back to normal. She stood. And you write Customer Retention Initiative in the box, and corporate leaves you alone, and you go back to being afraid of weather. Dev looked at her with the wet gratitude of a man being handed a rope. If you fix this, I'm putting you up for shift lead. You've been putting me up for shift lead for 2 years. This time I mean it differently. He didn't come the next night, or the one after, which she told herself she didn't notice. On the third night, at 3 exactly, the doors opened for a man wheeling a pallet jack, and Casimir Beaumont came in behind him carrying a box that was, this time, enormous. No, Mira said, before he reached the counter. Absolutely not. I'm not even looking at it. He stopped. He did the still thing, where he became briefly indistinguishable from the end cap display behind him. You have not heard the grievance. I don't need the grievance. Let me guess. The robot vacuum is judgmental. The standing mixer has opinions. The air fryer is... What's the air fryer? Sanctimonious? A flicker crossed his face. Surprise, maybe. It was hard to tell with him. His expressions arrived from a long way off. The robot vacuum, he said slowly, would not acknowledge me. It's a vacuum. It doesn't acknowledge anyone. It acknowledged the furniture. It mapped the entire apartment. It has a little map, did you know that? It makes a map. And it routed around every chair and every table and the absurd ottoman that came with the place. And it drove directly at me, repeatedly, with great confidence, as though I were a vacancy. He set the box down. It does not believe I am there. I find I cannot live with a machine that has decided I am furniture. And Mira's brain, which had been not finishing the thought for 3 weeks, finished it. Out loud, almost. She caught it on the way. Right, she said instead, very evenly. And the doors here don't open for you. And you only ever come at 3 in the morning. And you bought a whole kitchen and you don't… She stopped. You don't cook, do you? The air changed. The not changing of the doors, but bigger. No, Casimir said. I do not cook. Okay. She put both hands flat on the counter, the way she did when a return was about to become a situation. Okay, I told my manager I'd do a consultation. Figure out what you actually need. I'm a returns clerk, Mr. Beaumont. I have spent 4 years learning exactly what kind of person someone is by what they can't keep. And you are the most interesting file I've ever had. She slid the giant box back toward him. So I'm not processing this. I'm coming to your apartment, and I'm going to look at this collection of warfare you've assembled, and I'm going to figure out the one thing you can live with. Tomorrow, after my shift. Address? He looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned the matte black card over, and with a pen she handed him, wrote an address on the back of a return slip in handwriting that belonged to a different century. Beautiful, slanted, the letters joined in ways they didn't teach anymore. You will not be afraid, he said. It wasn't a question, and it wasn't a reassurance. It was closer to a hope. I work the graveyard shift at a hardware warehouse, Mira said. I stopped being afraid of weird around year 2. That, he said, is not the same as being prepared for it. And he left, behind a man returning a wheelbarrow, into a night that opened for everyone but him. Chapter 2, The Consultation. The address was a corner unit in a building so aggressively pleasant it looped back around to sinister. Beige carpet. A water feature in the lobby that trickled with no conviction. The door opened on a man in a gray cardigan holding a label maker. You must be the returns girl, he said, delighted. Oh, he was right. You do have a face like you've caught the whole world overcharging you. Come in, ignore the boxes, ignore all of it. I'm Bert. Bert. Bertrand, originally. I retired Bertrand around the Restoration. He beamed. Bert tests better. The Restoration. Long story. Tea? I have a kettle I'm very proud of. I chose it myself. He hates it. Bert was already filling it, and Mira filed him under the same drawer she'd been building for Casimir all week. Rich, strange, performing some elaborate bit she wasn't going to get the rules of tonight. People with this much money got odd. It was practically the point of the money. The condo was enormous and beige and furnished by someone who had only read about furniture. And stacked along one whole wall, in towers, were appliances, a city of them, sealed and gleaming, each wearing a neat label. Killed it, blender. Routed around him, vacuum. Defeated him personally, air fryer. He kept the fridge, Mira said. The building requires a fridge. He's on his 3rd. This one sends him a notification every morning telling him his food is expiring. Bert lowered his voice fondly. He doesn't cook. He buys the food for, I don't know, ambiance, and it goes off, and the fridge grieves at him. It's the great tragedy of his life right now, and I think it's marvelous. Rich bachelor doesn't cook, buys groceries to look normal, lets them rot, Mira translated. Yeah, I've seen that file. It's a sad file. She walked the wall, reading. Routed around him. The vacuum? It would not acknowledge him, mapped the whole apartment, drove around every chair, and went straight at him, repeatedly, like he wasn't there. Bert was gleeful. He took it personally. He takes everything personally. It's his defining trait. Sensor's probably just bad, cheap LiDAR. If he stands really still, it can't tell him from a wall. Mira tapped the next box. Defeated him personally. Air fryer. The instructions used crisp as a verb. He considered it a provocation. There was an incident with one potato I am sworn not to describe. Okay, that one's just being a man. She kept moving. There was a logic to all of it, she was finding, if you held it at the right angle. The cold, the hours, the not eating, the machines that didn't like him. A guy this rich and this odd had probably been weird and alone for so long the weirdness had calcified into a whole operating system. She'd met versions of it. None of them this tall. None of them this, whatever the stomach thing was. "Bert!" called a voice from deeper in the apartment. "He can hear us," Bert said, unbothered. "He has excellent hearing. It's almost his only domestic skill." Casimir came in from the hall. In the lamplight, he looked less like furniture and more like a man, standing very deliberately inside a life that didn't fit him, and Mira's stomach did the unprofessional thing it had been doing all week, which she was choosing to ignore on the grounds that he was a customer and she had a job. "You came," he said. "I said I would. Triage." She set her bag down and surveyed the wall. "We're not keeping the blender, the vacuum, or any fridge that texts you. Show me what you actually need this kitchen to do." "That," Casimir said, "is the difficulty. I do not particularly eat." "Sure, intermittent fasting, very now." She pulled 3 boxes off the wall. "You'd be amazed how many guys your, whatever, tax bracket treat dinner like a moral failing." "Fine, you don't need a kitchen, you need a building inspection to pass. 1 fridge, 1 lamp, 1 thing that makes a noise so the neighbors believe a human lives here. Everything else is theater you bought because you panicked." She stacked the returns by the door. "Which brings me to the actual consultation, the part I drove here for." "There is an actual consultation?" "Mr. Beaumont, you returned 14 appliances in 3 weeks. Sealed. Perfect. Always at 3 in the morning, always to me." She turned around and leaned on the wall of his failures and looked at him, the brilliant, unbothered look that had ended better men's evenings. "I read people for a living. I know the difference between someone who can't keep things and someone who keeps finding reasons to come back to the desk. You're not bad at appliances. I mean, you are, catastrophically, but that's not why you keep showing up." She let it sit. "You don't have a return problem. You have a me problem. So, what are we actually doing here?" The silence had a quality to it. Even Bert had gone still over the kettle. "Ah," Casimir said. "Ah. I had a speech." "Of course you did. It was very good. I have had several centuries to prepare for difficult conversations, and I prepared one. And you have dismantled it with a sentence, the way you dismantle everything, which is, I should tell you, the entire problem." He set his hands on the back of a chair, perfectly still. "The first night. The blender. You told me no, and you argued with me about whether a kitchen appliance can hold a grudge. And I have not, in a very long time, had a person look at me and see a nuisance rather than a thing to be careful around. It was the most ordinary I have felt in longer than I will admit to you on a first visit." A pause, and something almost happened at his mouth and didn't. "So I bought a toaster, so that I could bring it back. And then a kettle. And then it became absurd, and I am aware that it became absurd, and I could not find the part where a man simply asks. So I kept, instead, returning things." It was, objectively, the strangest confession Mira had ever received standing next to a robot vacuum. It should have read as unhinged. Instead, it read as the most painfully honest thing anyone had said to her in years, delivered by a man who clearly found honesty more frightening than whatever he was hiding under all that stillness. "Okay," she said when she could. I'm going to be straight with you. That's a deranged way to ask a girl out. I am aware. Like, genuinely, $6,000 of deranged. My manager opened a fraud case. I will reimburse the store its inconvenience. That's not the... She pressed her fingers to her eyes and started laughing, helplessly, the laugh she'd been holding since the leaf blower line. "You could have just asked, 3 weeks ago, at the desk, like a person." "I did not know how. I have watched people do it. It looked effortless and humiliating, and I could not make myself attempt it. Then attempt it now. She dropped her hands. Go on. I've made it easy. There's no appliance. There's just me, standing in your sad beige apartment, telling you the returns thing is over. So ask. Boring, honest version. Not a thing about hostile blenders. He looked at her for a long moment, and Bert, very quietly, set the kettle down so as not to miss it. Mira. Her name in his mouth was a careful, deliberate object. Would you allow me to take you somewhere that is not this apartment, and not your counter, and not 3 a.m, where I might be permitted to find out what you are like when you are not at work? See, that wasn't so hard. It was agonizing. I would rather have fought a duel. I have fought a duel. It was less. Yes, Mira said. Yes? Yes, Casimir, you can take me out. God help you. She picked her bag back up, grinning, and nodded at the wall of boxes. And we're still returning the vacuum. That thing's been ignoring you for weeks, and frankly, it's the only one in here with sense. Bert, Casimir said, not taking his eyes off her, in the voice of a man reporting the most important development of a long life. She said yes. I heard, said Bert, who had retired Bertrand around the Restoration, and had not, in all the years since, been this pleased about anything. Chapter 3. The Things He Didn't Know. He took her to a planetarium because it was open late and dark, and he had, he confessed, run out of nerve at the idea of a restaurant where she would eat and he would be expected to. That's the 3rd time you've ducked a meal, Mira said, lying back in the reclined seat under a fake sky. Date 1, you ate before. Date 2, big lunch. Now we're at a planetarium at 10 p.m., specifically so there's no food. I have a complicated relationship with eating. You've got a whole thing. I've clocked the thing. She turned her head. In the projector light, his profile was very still and very lovely and very cold-looking, and she filed that too. Eating disorder, intense dietary thing, religious thing, I don't need the file. I'm just saying I see the thing, and I'm not going to make you sit in an Olive Garden about it. Something moved through his face that she couldn't read. That, he said, is a remarkably generous interpretation. I contain generosity. It surprises everyone. She looked back up at the false stars. Okay, deep question. You get 1. What's the oldest thing you remember? He was quiet long enough that she thought she'd lost him. A comet, he said finally. I was very young. Everyone was frightened of it. They thought it meant the end of something. It did not. It simply went away again, and the people who had been frightened went back to being frightened of ordinary things. His voice had gone somewhere far off. I remember thinking it was unfair, that a thing could be that large and that rare and pass over us entirely, and we would only ever be able to talk about how afraid it had made us. We never once talked about how beautiful it was. Mira didn't say anything for a moment. The thing about him, the thing she kept not filing, was that he said sentences like that the way other men said they liked her hair. You talk like you were there for the actual comet, she said. Do I? You talk like you've been disappointed by a really long list of people. 800 years is a long list. There it is again, the 800 years bit. You and Bert with the Restoration. She grinned. You guys commit to it, I'll give you that. It's a whole shared bit. It is a whole shared bit, Casimir agreed, gravely, and changed the subject, and Mira let him, because she was busy not filing the way her whole chest had gone warm at the comet. The 3rd date she made him do karaoke, on principle, because he had admitted he had never done it and she had decided that was a crime. I do not sing, Casimir said, holding the microphone the way a man holds a thing he suspects of being armed. Everyone sings. It's a low bar. The bar is on the floor. I sang once, in 1640, at a wedding. The marriage failed, and I have always privately suspected I contributed. You're not getting out of it with a fun fact. She scrolled the songbook. We're doing a duet. You get the easy part. All you have to do is come in on the chorus and look like you mean it, which, by the way, you do constantly, about appliances, so I know it's in there. This is the most frightened I have been in 200 years. You said that about the toaster. And I was correct about the toaster. But he came in on the chorus, half a beat late, in a low, careful voice that turned 3 heads in the bar, and looked at her the entire time like the song was a thing he was saying rather than singing, and Mira had to look at the screen very hard to keep her face in order. "Okay," she said after. "You can sing. You've been holding out on me. 800 years of that voice, and you do appliance complaints. I do not waste it on rooms I do not care about." Smooth. Was that smooth? That felt smooth. I have no idea. I have not attempted smooth since the 18th century. You will have to tell me. He paused, and the careful thing came back into him, and he said, quietly, the way he said the true things. "You smell like rain and the inside of a paperback, and something underneath that I have no word for in any of the languages I learned, and I have been trying to place it for weeks, and I have decided it is simply you, and that I am not going to solve it, which is a new experience for me, not solving a thing. I find I do not mind." Mira blinked. "That's a lot of words about how I smell, and somehow it's the nicest thing anyone said to me. What is wrong with you?" "A great deal," he said. "I keep a list. It is long." It went like that for weeks, and the weeks were the best ones she could remember. She learned that he could not pass a hardware store without flinching. She learned that he tipped like a man trying to single-handedly repair a debt to the entire service industry, and that when she teased him about it, he said, "I have been served by a great many people who were never thanked, and I find I cannot stop trying to fix it retroactively." Which was either the most pretentious thing she'd ever heard or the kindest, and she genuinely could not decide. She learned that he listened, completely, with a focus that should have been unnerving, and instead made her feel like the only file ever opened. And that he remembered everything: the name of her terrible manager, the exact phrasing of a joke she'd made 9 days earlier, the fact that she took her coffee like a person punishing herself. She taught him things back. She taught him that you could, in fact, just text someone, that he did not need to compose a message as though it would be read aloud at his funeral. She taught him the specific joy of a gas station hot dog at 4 a.m., which he did not eat, but watched her eat with the rapt attention of a man at the opera. She taught him to stop holding doors like a sentry and start holding them like a person, though he never quite got it, and the automatic ones at the planetarium still hadn't opened for him, which she'd decided was a sensor calibration issue and the building's problem, not hers. "You're always cold," she said one night, her hand in his, because she had finally started doing that, holding his hand, and his hand was always, always cold. Like, alarmingly. "Have you seen a doctor about your circulation?" "It has been looked into." And I have made my peace with it." He turned her hand over in his, studying it like a document, her warmth against his cold the way it always was, and she felt the half-second pause in him, the small hitch, before he said, very quietly, "You run very warm. Did you know that? It is the first thing He stopped. "You are very warm. It is a good quality in a person. That's the nicest anyone's ever called me a hot water bottle." One night, late, on a rooftop she talked her way onto because the city looked like spilled change from up there, she asked him the thing she'd been circling for weeks. "Doesn't it get lonely?" She waved a hand. "The bit you and Bert do, the long list of people bit. If I take it seriously for a second. Outliving everyone. Doesn't that just hollow you out?" He was quiet, the way he got quiet, like he was deciding how much truth a question could hold. "It is not the outliving," he said finally. "Everyone imagines it is the outliving, the funerals, the standing at the edge of other people's endings. It is not that. You learn to carry that. What hollows you out is the sameness. After a few centuries, nothing is new. You have seen every kind of war and every kind of wedding and every kind of person being brave or cruel or foolish in the dark, and you start to drift. You stop being surprised. And a creature that cannot be surprised is very close to a creature that is not really there." He looked at her. "And then, very rarely, something is new. A piece of music written after you stopped listening. A question no one has asked you. A girl who argues with you about a blender at 3 in the morning, as though you are an ordinary, irritating man and not a thing to be careful around. His voice was very low. You have no idea what it does to me, being surprised. I had forgotten it was possible. I would have paid any amount of money. I did, in fact. $6,000 of appliances. That's the most expensive flirting in recorded history. I am aware. Bert keeps a spreadsheet. He is very proud of it. You're telling me I'm a novelty. She bumped his cold shoulder. Like the planetarium or the gas station hot dog. I am telling you that you are the first new thing in 200 years, Casimir said, not bumping back, going still in that way that meant he meant it all the way down. And that I have been treating you like one. And returning you to your desk every night so I could discover you again the next. And that I am terrified of the day you stop being a surprise, because I do not know who I am when nothing is new. A pause. But I should like to find out, with you, if that is permitted. It's permitted, Mira said, around the thing happening in her throat. God, it's extremely permitted. The kiss happened in the worst possible place, which she'd later decide was the only way it could have happened with him. Not under the fake stars. In the fluorescent aisle of a 24-hour pharmacy at 2 in the morning, between the cold medicine and a display of reading glasses, because she'd said something dry about his inability to choose a phone charger, and he'd looked at her with such sudden, undefended helplessness that she'd just reached up and done it, to put them both out of their misery. He went still, even more still than usual, which she wouldn't have thought possible. And then his cold hand came up to the side of her face with a care that undid her, like she was the rare thing, the comet, the one that wasn't going to pass over and be remembered only for the fear. And when they broke apart, he looked, for 1 second, completely wrecked. Okay, Mira breathed. Okay. We should have led with that 3 weeks of appliances ago. Mira. Yeah. I need to tell you something. Soon. Something I have been... The fluorescent light hummed. His jaw worked once and went still. There is a thing about me. I would like to be the one who tells you. I would like to choose how and when, and to do it carefully, because it is the kind of thing that... He stopped again. I would like a little more time, to earn the telling. Will you give me that? And Mira, who read people for a living, who had clocked his every evasion and filed them all under ordinary human damage, looked at this strange, cold, beautiful man falling apart in a pharmacy and felt the first cold finger of something that was not ordinary at all. Yeah, she said, because she loved him, which she also hadn't filed yet. Take your time. She should not have given him the time, but that is the thing about being brilliant. You can explain anything, right up until you can't. Chapter 4. The Thing in the Fridge. It was the most ordinary night they'd had, which was why it broke the way it did. She was at his apartment. He'd put on a record, an actual record, because of course he had, and she was barefoot on the beige carpet arguing with him about whether a film he'd never seen was worth the runtime, and she got up to get ice, because she'd finally retrained the 2 shapes machine, and the sphere ones were genuinely delightful, and on her way she was thirsty, and she opened the fridge. She'd never opened his fridge before. There'd never been a reason. There was the cover food, going off, exactly as Bert had said. There was the kettle he hated, inexplicably stored in there, and there, on the middle shelf, in a neat row, dated in his beautiful old handwriting, were the pouches. She knew what they were immediately. Her brain was very fast. That was the trouble with her brain. It had always been faster than her. It solved the puzzle before she'd agreed to play, and it solved this one in the cold light of the open fridge before she could close the door and pretend. Blood. Medical pouches of blood, dated, stored beside groceries he never ate. And then the rest of it arrived all at once, every filed and explained away thing pulling itself out of the drawer she'd shut it in. Never eats. Always cold, alarmingly cold. Doctor won't help cold. Only ever at night. The pharmacy at 2 a.m. The planetarium at 10. 3 in the morning. 3 in the morning. Always 3 in the morning. The doors that didn't open. The vacuum that drove through him because it did not believe he was there. 800 years. The restoration. The comet he talked about, like he'd stood under it. The hearing. The stillness. The way he'd never, not once, in all the photos she'd taken on all their nights. Actually, she'd thought it was the lighting, she'd thought. She had explained it. She had explained all of it. She was so good at explaining things. She closed the fridge very quietly. He was already standing. He hadn't moved toward her. He was across the room with his hands at his sides, and his face had gone to a stillness she had never seen on him. The stillness of a man watching a thing he loved find the one drawer he'd asked for more time to open himself. Mira, don't. Her voice came out steadier than she was. Don't do the careful voice. Just give me the boring, honest version. The one you keep asking me for. She turned around. Her back was against the fridge that held his actual diet, and her hands were flat on it. The situation gesture, except there had never been a situation like this. Tell me what I'm filing. The thing she'd said to him once as a joke, at the counter, in another life, when the worst thing he could have been was a fraud case. You already know, he said, gently. You've known since the door opened. You are the fastest person I have ever met. You simply did not want it to be true, and I let you not want it, because I am a coward, and because every hour you didn't know was an hour I got to keep being the cold man with the bad circulation, instead of the thing in the fridge. Say it. I am a vampire. He didn't move. The record had ended and was clicking softly against its own edge. I am 800 years old. The comet was real. The blood is real. I drink it from bags because a long time ago I decided I would rather be a sad appliance, sealed and correct, than a predator who frightens the warm, quick people I cannot stop wanting to be near. And I imprinted on you, Mira, the first night, over a box, the way I have not, in centuries, fixed on a single person. And I have spent every night since terrified of exactly this moment, which is why I asked for time, which I did not deserve and which has now run out in front of my own refrigerator. The word predator sat in the beige room and did not leave. You drink blood, she said. Yes. From people. From bags. Once, long ago, from people. Never without, he stopped. It does not matter how I dress it. Yes, I am the thing the stories are about. Less the cape. More the loneliness. And the imprint thing. Her voice cracked on it. Is that a leash? Did you do something to me? Is what I feel even? No. It came out of him hard and fast and absolute. The only loud thing she'd ever heard him say. No, there is no leash. There is nothing on you. What you feel is yours, every ounce of it. And if you walk out of here and never come back, it stays yours, and I will never reach for it. The imprint is mine. It is a thing that happened to me, not to you. You owe it nothing. You owe me nothing. Quieter. Least of all now. And that, somehow, was worse than a leash would have been. Because it meant it was real. Because it meant she'd fallen for a man who fed on people. With her whole stupid, brilliant heart. With full agency. With no excuse. And there was no spell to blame, and no file to close, and nowhere to put it. I have to go, she said. I know. I have to. I can't. I need. She was already getting her shoes, her hands not working right. I love you. That's the actual problem, Casimir. I'm not scared you'll hurt me. I'm scared because I love you and you're. She couldn't finish it. She got the door open. The hallway. The building that opened for everyone. Mira. She stopped, didn't turn. Take all the time you need, he said from inside the apartment. From exactly where he'd been standing, not following, not pulling, the predator who had built an entire self around being a creature who stopped. All of it. I have a great deal of it, and you are the only thing I have ever wanted to spend it on. And I will spend it here, waiting, whether or not you come back. Not as a debt, just as a fact. She left, into the night that opened its doors for her, and did not go back. Chapter 5. The Keeper. She froze him out for 5 weeks. It was not a decision so much as a whether. She went to work, she processed returns, she got the shift lead job, finally, and Dev cried a little, and she went home to an apartment the size of his foyer that had never once frightened her and now felt like the only place in the world where everything was exactly what it said it was. A toaster that toasted, a lamp that lit, a fridge with food in it, nothing in it that drank. He did not call. He did not text, though she'd taught him how. He sent nothing, which she understood, after the second week, was its own enormous restraint, the same restraint she'd felt under his hand in the pharmacy, all that held weight bent around the one thing he would not do, which was make this any harder for her than it already was. But he was there, not pushing, just there. The first week, a box appeared at her returns desk, addressed in the beautiful old handwriting. Inside was a toaster, the good kind, with a note. I am not asking you to take me back. I am asking you to have a toaster that works. The blender people owed you one. She did not respond. The third week, another box, a lamp. The card said only, people who live somewhere turn lights on. You taught me that. She put the lamp on her counter and turned it on, and hated how much she liked it. And on the 35th night, at 3 a.m, because some hours belong to some people, she found him standing in the hallway outside her apartment, not at the door, not touching it, a careful and deliberate distance from a threshold he could not cross, holding a plate. You can't come in, she said through the gap of the chain. I know the rule. Bert told me about the rule, weeks ago, in case you're wondering how I... She stopped. You can't come in unless I say. I know. I am not here to come in. He held up the plate. On it was toast. Just toast, badly made, one corner darker than the rest. I have been failing to operate a toaster for 5 weeks. Bert offered to help and I refused, because I needed to do one thing in this entire catastrophe with my own hands. I have burned a great deal of bread. I set off the smoke detector, which I have learned is a louder and more opinionated appliance than the toaster, and they are not on speaking terms. I cannot eat this. I will never eat this. But you said, weeks ago, that you learn what a person is by what they keep, and I have spent 800 years keeping nothing, returning everything, sealing it all up so that none of it could be lost, and I wanted you to know that I have stopped. He set the plate down on the floor of the hallway, in front of the door she had not opened. I made you a thing, with my own hands. It stays, and so will I, at exactly this distance, for as long as you want, and not 1 inch closer than you allow. Mira looked at the toast through the gap in the chain and discovered her vision had gone unreliable. That's a deranged way to win a girl back, she said. I am consistent. You sent me a toaster and a lamp, with notes, like a Victorian ghost doing customer retention. I did not know what else to send. I considered flowers. Flowers die, and I did not think you needed, just now, a daily reminder from me that warm things end. He said it plainly, and it landed plainly, the way the true things did. A toaster does not die. A toaster simply works, every morning, indifferent to whether it is loved. I thought you might want one thing in your kitchen that asked nothing of you. Given what the last thing in your kitchen turned out to be. The last thing in my kitchen, Mira said, was you. Eating nothing, lying about your circulation. Yes. He did not flinch from it. That. You fed on people, Casimir. Long ago, and I will carry it the rest of a very long life. I will not tell you it is nothing. I will tell you that I have spent the centuries since trying to be the kind of creature who deserves to stand in a hallway like this, and that I have never once, in all that time, wanted to deserve it as much as I want to now. His voice dropped, undefended, the wrecked thing from the pharmacy. If you tell me to go, I will go, and I will not haunt you, because that is the one thing I refuse to be to you. But I had to bring you the toast first. A man should make his case with something concrete, I am told. And Mira, who had spent 5 weeks proving to herself that she could live in a world where everything was only what it said it was, discovered that she did not want to, because a world like that did not have him in it. And he was, against every single thing her brilliant explaining brain had ever concluded, the truest thing she'd ever read. She undid the chain. She opened the door the whole way, which she did for no one, because the entire point of a door was the part where it stayed shut. Casimir Beaumont, no further questions. Her voice was not steady, and she let it not be. Come in. I'm keeping you. There's no receipt and there's no return window, and I checked, so don't even. And the man who had stood outside the glass of a hardware store rather than enter a place that did not want him, who had waited 5 weeks in a hallway at a careful and deliberate distance, stepped across the one threshold in the world that had been opened on purpose, for him, by someone who had decided not to give him back. She kissed him in her ugly kitchen, under the lamp he'd sent, and it was better than the pharmacy because this time nobody was about to fall apart. Bert's going to be unbearable, she said into his collar. Bert is already unbearable. Bert has been unbearable since the Restoration. He texted me, while I was standing in your hallway, to ask how it was going. He calls it a group chat. There are 2 of us in it. He named it. Casimir sounded genuinely haunted. He named it the Returns Department. That's incredible. I love him. He's my favorite of your, however many people you've got. He is my only person. The list of the dead is long. The list of the living is Bert, and now, if you are very sure, you. He drew back just enough to look at her, the cold of him steady under her hands. Are you very sure? You may take longer. You took 5 weeks already and I survived it, barely. I will survive more. Casimir. I undid the chain. I keep things, remember? I'm the worst person in the world to fall for, because I do not let go of anything. Ask my closet. She tugged him back down. You're not getting returned. Make your peace with it the way you made your peace with your circulation. That is the single most romantic thing anyone has said to me in 8 centuries. I know. I'm a catch. Now hush. But she didn't let go, and neither did he, and the cold and the warm of them held in the small lit kitchen for a long time before she pulled back and got serious. I have to ask you something, she said, her forehead against his cold chest, listening to the silence where a heartbeat wasn't. And I need the boring, honest version. The blood, the bags. Bert said, ages ago, before I knew what any of it meant, that the bags keep you running, but they don't. They're not. They satisfy nothing, Casimir said. No, they do not. When's the last time it wasn't a bag? He was quiet, the cold of him very still against her warmth. 40 years, he said. And it has been a very long time since I wanted it to be anything else. I am telling you that as a fact, not a request. I will drink from a bag for the rest of your life, and the rest of mine, and never once ask you for. I'm offering, Mira said. Try to keep up. I read situations for a living, and I'm telling you, I'm offering. What happened then, the script will not follow all the way in, because some doors close on purpose. What Mira would remember was the cold of him first, the deep cold of stone in a cellar, and the care of it, and the way his eyes had gone full amber, wine dark and lit, and the way that should have terrified her, and instead felt like being trusted with something no one alive had touched in 40 years. The wrist, not the throat. It did not hurt. He had promised it wouldn't, and in this one specific thing, he was a man who kept his promises. And underneath it, she felt the whole held weight of 8 centuries of stopping, bent around the small, warm fact of her, and understood that she was, for 1 minute, the most carefully handled thing in the world. He stopped well before she'd have made him. He pressed his thumb to her wrist, where the small wound was already closing, and sat back. And for a moment, the managed man was entirely gone, and what was left looked at her with something so undefended, she had to look away to let him keep it. Thank you, he said. His voice had dropped half an octave and not climbed back. Yeah, Mira said, slightly cold, slightly extraordinary. I know. It was, much later, over the worst toast he had ever produced and she had ever willingly eaten, that she brought up the 50 years. I'm 30 in October, she said. You're 800. He went very still, the deep still, the decision still, except there was no cup to turn, only the plate between them. I am aware of the arithmetic, he said carefully. I have been aware of it since the planetarium. I have decided not to raise it, because it is yours to raise. And because every version of me that raises it first is a version trying to keep you. And I have promised myself I will never again try to keep a warm, quick person by making her choices smaller. So I'm raising it, she set the toast down. I'm not doing the thing where I'm a sad, beautiful 50 years you spend the next 9 centuries talking about like a comet. I watched you describe a comet, Casimir. I'm not being a comet. I'm going to be the thing you keep. Mira, just her name, set down with terrible care. You do not know what you are asking for. It is the heaviest thing there is. It is days of pain, and it is a door that does not open backward, and it is me, with these hands, doing it to you. I will not do it tonight. I will not do it because the toast was bad and the lamp is on. We will do it properly, when you are certain, and you will say so out loud more than once, on more than one night, before I so much as reach for you. Then write it in the box. She picked the toast back up. Soon. Not tonight, but soon. Not because I'm afraid of the 50 years. Because I've decided I'm keeping this, and a thing you're keeping, you do not put a return window on. And for the first time in 800 years, the man who had outlived empires looked at a warm, quick, mortal woman and did not see a comet passing over. He saw something that intended to stay. On purpose. Soon, and by her own hand as much as his. Behind them, on the counter, the lamp he'd sent burned much too brightly for the hour, banishing the shadows with an offensive zeal, doing the single thing it was built to do. Neither of them returned it.